Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of GDDV 501 Lighting and Rendering. My name is Kasanis. Well, guys, we're moving along pretty well here. We're almost finished the academic portion of this course, and the second half of this course is going to really focus on the practical side of cinematography for games. We're going to start exploring things within Unity and start to understand, our cameras and what we can do with all the different camera ideas that we've got inside of Unity. We'll look at lighting. We'll look at the idea of the cameras themselves. We'll look at the idea of Cinemachine. We've got a lot of stuff to do in practical terms. But for now, guys, let's take a look at what we've already done as far as the academics are concerned. We've covered the course intro and an introduction to cinematography. We've talked about the real-world camera, shot composition, framing, and the moving camera. This week, we started with the idea of shot transitions. And we're going to continue today with the idea of continuity editing. All right, let's get started. So, continuity editing. What exactly is continuity editing? Well, continuity editing is a method of hiding our cuts or hiding our transitions. That's really what it's about. We talked about continuity errors previously and how we can end up with continuity errors due to a number of different things that can occur, whether we've got a mismatch on action or we've got a mismatch in information. We've talked about this already in a previous video. And our goal is to make sure that the transitions themselves, through continuity editing, the goal is to make sure that the transitions themselves are not noticeable. We want to make sure that there is some element that is going to tie the scenes together, that's going to allow our viewer to quickly orient themselves within space or within the location as far as the screen is concerned, or even as far as the world is concerned that they're looking at. We want to make sure that they've got this. We want to make sure that through proper continuity editing, that the transitions are not noticeable and that our players are playing the game rather than actually looking at the production of the game. So we're going to talk about the idea of match cuts today, and we're going to talk about 3 different match cuts: graphical match cut, cut on action, and sound bridge. A graphical match cut is when a visual element is carried over from scene to scene. And this visual element being maintained is going to allow our players to quickly orient themselves within the space and the screen itself. A cut on action is when the movement or the action of our subject continues on across a cut. And when it continues on across the cut, it ties those 2 scenes together. Because the action appears to be continuous, it kind of ties it all together, and we assume that it's the same place and the same time, and we kind of ignore the fact that the camera itself has changed. And lastly, we're going to talk about the idea of a sound bridge. And the sound bridge is an audio or sound element that continues over into the next scene. It's continued on. So it's not that we are hearing an element early. It is that the sound from one scene continues on to the sound of the second scene. And that's really going to allow the world itself to feel like one continuous space or one space we're in the same time and in the same space, right? That's what it's going to allow us to do. So it's an element that continues across the 2. It's not like the split edits that we talked about previously, where we're hearing the sound from the next scene early, or we're seeing the visuals early. It's not that at all. What it is that we continue a sound across the cut. Okay, so let's start off with the idea of the graphical match cut. And as I've mentioned, it is maintaining a visual element over a cut, and then this allows the viewer to very quickly orient themselves within the scene. We talked about this previously as far as games were concerned as well, and we talked about the idea that as we load in a new scene, if our character for our game is not in the same place that we would expect it to be, it's going to take our player a few moments to orient themselves as far as the game is concerned. And we don't want that, right? We want them to have an anchor point. We talked about this when it came to the idea of good composition. We want to have some type of anchor point in our scene, and utilizing the player's character as an anchor point is a great idea. That anchor point is going to allow them to focus in on their character, right away understand where they are in the scene, and then react to whatever is happening in the scene. So that's really super important. There's a lot of really great graphical match cuts that we can see within film and within games, but I think one of the most famous examples comes from Citizen Kane, and this particular sequence is way ahead of its time. What you're going to notice is that in this introduction shot, we're moving in towards a castle, and as we move towards the castle, the window remains constantly in the same location. All right, so and then finally we move to a graphical match cut, and we'll take a look at that. From a graphical match cut, we transition from an exterior shot into an interior shot. Okay, so let's take a quick look at this. Okay, so I'm actually just going to scrub this so you guys can see it occurring. It's a really, really long introduction to this, but let's just take a scrub on it. So we start off right away with these different cuts, and we are now moving in towards this castle. That's the entire point. We're moving in towards this castle. And right now, what we want to take a look at is this light right here. This light is going to be maintain its position, relatively maintain its position in this upper right-hand corner of our screen. If I scrub this forward, you're going to see as we transition, we're getting closer and closer to the castle, but again, the window is still in the same location. We've changed positions. We're much closer to the castle now. We've actually changed angles, but the light itself is still in the same place. There we go. Now, again, we're seeing the same thing, but now we're seeing it reflected in the water. But again, the light is in exactly the same location. And as we scrub forward, there we go. We're moving a little closer yet. Our light, as we move closer yet, our light, and so on. So we're doing all of this, and what we're eventually going to do, we're moving really close now, what we're eventually going to do is get a close-up right here of the window itself. And now we're going to use the graphical match cut to move into the actual castle. So from the exterior of the castle into the interior of the castle. So if I move this forward, we're going to see that it's going to darken, so the lights go out, and as we scrub forward and they come back on, we are now inside of the castle. We're in an interior shot at this point in time. Okay, if we want, we can kind of play that. Hopefully this won't result in a strike, just so we can see that final cut. All right, so I'm going to hit play here, and I'm going to see this final cut. There we go. We now transition to the window on the outside. Lights go out, and as the lights come back in, we transition into an interior shot. Okay, so now we're on the interior. All right. There's actually more to the graphical match cut there, because obviously we didn't just suddenly snap onto the inside. We did this kind of dissolve into the interior shot, but what was maintained throughout that entire thing was the window. Okay, so that is a graphical match cut. Let's head back to the lecture. Okay, so the next match cut I'd like to discuss is the idea of cut on action. And the cut on action really is about continuing an action or movement from one scene to the next, from one shot to the next. So the action or movement is continued across the cut. And this continued motion gives a sense of continuity and spatial awareness to our viewer, right? They understand very quickly where they are in reference to where they were previously. As we cut, right, our camera changes in some way. And as the camera changes, this action roots the viewer in the location. It roots them in the time. So they really understand where they are. And it doesn't take them long to orient themselves as far as the space is concerned. So it's really, really great for that. There's a lot of really great examples of its use. In fact, it's used very heavily. Cut on action is probably one of the most important rules that you can actually follow. Kurosawa does a great job of utilizing cut on action. He's constantly utilizing cut on action to make sure that the scenes blend together, that we don't actually see the cuts in his films. And it's not just Kurosawa, right? Every director will actually do it. I'm just thinking about Kurosawa right now. Anyway, even with highly energetic scenes where there's a ton of movement, utilizing the cut on action is going to allow our viewer to really keep in touch with the timing and track the action of your scene. So if you've got a great big fight scene that's going on, if a character throws a punch, then following that punch and cutting before that punch lands, or just as that punch lands, we continue that action across the cut, is really going to accentuate, first of all, the power of that punch, but it also allows us to immediately register the fact that, yes, this is a continued action. So even in highly frenetic scenes or highly energetic scenes, cut on action can work wonders as far as spatial awareness is concerned. Another use of cut on action is to switch from one location to the next. So we can almost use it as a scene wipe, depending on how it's been used. If, let's say, you've got a car that's moving from one side, let's say from the left-hand side of your screen to the right-hand side of the screen, about halfway through, with the car itself acting as a wipe. When the car continues on, well, we've switched cars and we're now in another location. But because this action has continued, it really gives a sense of flow to the particular shot. So we can actually use it as well as a scene wipe, this cut on action. There are a lot of great examples, as I've mentioned already. We could look at Kurosawa, but I think that we'll take a look at The Matrix. That's the one I've got listed here. We'll take a look at The Matrix. It goes into a fight scene, and even though I don't love this particular example because it's a little bit off, I always find that it's a little bit off. But it's really, really evident. We see the character open up his jacket, and as that opens his jacket, we cut, and then we see what's inside the jacket. All right, let's take a look at the scene from The Matrix. All right, I'm going to hit play here, and we're going to see Neo open up his jacket, and it's going to immediately cut on to the next shot. Watch what happens here. So he opens up his jacket, and we cut as the jacket is being opened up, right? And that cut is supposed to be invisible. Now we see exactly, oh my God, he's got all these weapons. We're going to see a second cut on action in just one moment here when the actual fight begins. Let's hit play, and you'll see it here. Zooming up. Oh my God, what is that? Boom, punch, and we cut on action as the guy is flying away. We didn't cut on action on the punch. I think I would have liked to see that better, but here we go. We got it here. There's our cut. Boom, and we actually see the entirety of the cut. Now, the actor is now flying over here, right? The security guard is flying over here, and we cut to this location where we continue to see the flight, all right? So there's two very quick back-to-back cut-on actions, and that's really what it is. It's really self-explanatory, utilizing the action to tie the scenes together. All right, let's head back to the lecture. Okay, the last match cut I want to talk about today is the sound bridge. And the sound bridge utilizes a sound or some type of audio to establish the location. There's a continuity in location. We're still in the same location. Or it gives us understanding of where we are relative to the previous location. And it's not like a split edit. We talked about the split edit before, where the split edit allows for a sound to come in early. Or allows a visual to come in early. It's not that at all. Instead, what it is a sound that continues across one cut or to the next. So from one shot to the next shot, a sound is continued. There are a lot of great examples, but I think we're going to take a look at an example from Titanic. In this particular sequence, they introduce Jack, and they utilize the Titanic's horn. Is it called a horn? Whistle, I don't know what it's called. They use the Titanic's, that thing, to tie the two scenes together. All right, let's take a look at a scene from the Titanic. Okay, obviously for this particular demonstration, I'm going to need to turn the sound of the film on. And here, like I've mentioned, we're going to be introducing Jack in a moment. These characters are coming on. Rose is now coming on to the Titanic. And she's talking about, what's happening in her life. The horn goes off, the whistle goes off, the toot toot, whatever it's called, goes off, and then we cut to Jack. So let's take a look.
I was everything a well-brought-up girl should be. Inside, I was screaming.
Okay, so that's our example. What was done in this particular example, the whistle from the Titanic, which we see in the background, we see the steam, and we still hear that sound, and now we're cutting into Jack. Jack is sitting at this bar, when he wins his ticket onto the Titanic. And then just so you guys know, the Titanic crashes at the end of this movie. The Titanic crashes on an iceberg, and they sink. Just so you guys know. All right, anyway, guys, that is a sound bridge. The sound continued across the cut. This continued across the cut, and it tied these two locations together. All right, let's head back to the lecture. All right, guys, so that is our match cuts. We talked about the graphical match cut, a visual element carried over from one shot to the next, and we looked at the example of Citizen Kane. Rosebud is a sled. Then we took a look at cut on action, movement or action of a character carried over from one scene to the next. We took a look at Matrix. He's living in a simulation. Then we took a look at sound bridge. The sound bridge is audio or sound element carried from one scene to the next. For that, we took a look at Titanic. The Titanic sinks at the end, and almost everyone dies. Spoiler alert! I hope you guys enjoyed that and you learned a little something. Match cuts are extremely important, right? We want to hide our transitions. We don't want our viewer and our players to be looking at the production of our game. We want our viewers and players to be playing our games. All right, everyone? I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, let me know down below with a thumbs up. And if you didn't, a thumbs down is perfectly fine. I love hearing from you guys. Lots of comments, please. All right. Thumbs up, thumbs down, comments down below. And if you haven't done so, please take a few seconds to subscribe. Have yourselves a wonderful day, everyone.